Man comes home and turns pale. His German shepherd and house are stained with blood. A man arrived home one evening only to be greeted by a shocking and terrifying sight. His German shepherd was covered in blood, and so was the house. Frozen in fear, he rushed inside, desperate to understand what had happened. What he discovered left him pale with shock and disbelief. Carl Watson lived a peaceful, routine life in the small town of Oak Creek, Wisconsin. He taught history at the local college and resided in a cozy house on the outskirts of town. His constant companion was Bruno, a German shepherd he had adopted from a shelter several years ago. The bond between Carl and Bruno was unbreakable. Each morning, Carl and Bruno would run together through the neighborhood, navigating steep hills and crossing rushing streams. In the evenings, Bruno would settle at Carl's feet while he graded student papers, often late into the night. Surrounded by dense forest, Carl's house offered the perfect sense of seclusion and tranquility. At times, the distant howling of wolves would unsettle Bruno during the night. Carl had a close friend, Janice Hughes, who lived next door. She often visited, bringing the comforting scent of freshly baked apple pie with her. A veterinarian by profession, Janice always brought special dog biscuits she had baked for Bruno. Carl appreciated their friendship, but never thought of anything more, though he sometimes noticed Janice's thoughtful glances. One day, Carl decided to go on a week-long hiking trip in the mountains. He had been hesitant about this trip for a long time because he didn't want to leave Bruno alone. At night, he would toss and turn in bed, imagining Bruno whining at the door, waiting for his return. Kind Janice offered to take care of the dog, and Carl gratefully accepted, feeling relieved by her offer. Before leaving, Carl gave Bruno a long hug, burying his face in the dog's soft fur, and promised to come back soon. He left Janice detailed instructions on how to care for the dog, including Bruno's favorite toys and his special diet. Carl began his journey with a light heart, enjoying the beauty and silence of the mountains. He spent his days climbing steep slopes, reading by the campfire, and reflecting under the stars. Each evening, Janice sent him photos of Bruno and updates, including funny stories about the dog trying to catch a squirrel. On the fifth day, while navigating a difficult section of the trail, Carl received a troubling message from Janice. She had to perform a complicated surgery and wouldn't be able to visit Bruno that evening. Anxious, Carl reread the message but decided it would be fine for the dog to be alone for one night, though the thought of Bruno being lonely lingered in his mind. The next morning, Carl started packing to go home, hastily stuffing things into his backpack. He felt a strange unease, as if a chill was running down his spine, and decided to return a day early. As he descended the mountain, he stumbled several times, his thoughts about home and Bruno distracting him from careful walking. The drive home was filled with a sense of dread, Carl gripping the steering wheel tightly and speeding down the empty roads. When he arrived, the screech of brakes pierced the silence, and he immediately sensed something was wrong. The front door was ajar, and scattered items littered the porch, including a torn book and a broken vase. His heart raced as he called for Bruno, but there was no answer, only the echo of his own voice. Inside, the chaos was worse: furniture overturned, curtains torn, and dark stains on the walls that might have been blood. As Carl reached the living room, he saw the blood splattered across the walls and floor, realizing a violent struggle had occurred. In a panic, he shouted for Bruno, his voice rasping in fear. He searched every room, tripping over scattered items and broken glass. In the bedroom, he saw his clothes ripped apart and claw marks on the door. Finally, he heard a faint whimper coming from the basement. His heart was ready to jump out of his chest as he rushed down the stairs. Descending into the basement, Carl found Bruno huddled in the farthest corner. The dog was trembling all over and looked terrified, his usually shiny coat ruffled and stained with blood in places. But it seemed Bruno was not seriously injured. Seeing his owner, the dog weakly wagged his tail but didn't move from his spot. Carl rushed to Bruno, hugging him tightly as tears streamed down his face. Carl gently petted Bruno, whispering comforting words as he tried to calm both the dog and himself. Slowly, he realized someone had broken into his home, and Bruno had bravely tried to defend it. His heart swelled with pride and fear for his loyal dog. With trembling hands, Carl called the police and, struggling to dial, also reached out to Janice. She arrived quickly, her car screeching to a halt as she rushed in, pale and horrified by the destruction. She broke down in tears, hugging Carl and Bruno. The police arrived shortly after, their sirens breaking the silence as they began to inspect the house, their expressions growing more serious with each room they entered. They collected evidence, photographing the signs of struggle and gathering blood samples. A detective questioned Carl and Janice at length, noting down every detail. The officers praised Bruno for his bravery, with one even kneeling down to pet the dog, and promised to do everything possible to catch the criminals. Carl couldn't stay in his home after the break-in, overwhelmed by the smell of blood and the destruction. Janice insisted he and Bruno stay with her, and Carl gratefully agreed. The next few days were a blur as Carl struggled to focus at work, his thoughts consumed by the break-in and Bruno's fear. Janice took time off to support him, cooking meals and helping Bruno adjust. On the third day, a man with multiple dog bites arrived at the local hospital, his body covered in deep wounds. And there were claw marks on his face. A nurse who had heard about the incident at Carl's house immediately suspected something was wrong and reported it to the police. The police quickly arrived at the hospital and began questioning the suspect. At first, the man denied everything, claiming he had been bitten by a stray dog. But under the pressure of evidence and skillful questioning by the detective, he unexpectedly broke down and confessed to everything. He described how he and two accomplices had planned to rob the house, which seemed empty but were met with fierce resistance from a large dog. Moreover, he gave up his accomplices, naming their names and addresses. Within a few days, all the participants in the robbery were arrested and brought to justice. It turned out that this was a gang responsible for a series of burglaries in the area. Thanks to Bruno's bravery, not only was the robbery prevented, but dangerous criminals were also caught. The news of the robbers' arrest brought Carl some relief, but he still couldn't bring himself to return to his home. Every time he tried to approach the front door, he began to shake. Seeing his condition, Janice offered to help with the repairs and cleaning. She understood that Carl needed not only to physically restore the house, but also to banish the terrible memories from it. Together, they spent several weeks putting Carl's house back in order. They painted the walls in bright, cheerful colors, changing the entire atmosphere of the home. Carl and Janice worked together to repair the furniture, turning it into a form of therapy. They spent hours discussing design and selecting new curtains and rugs to completely transform the space. Shopping for replacements in local stores became an exciting adventure as they eagerly sought out new items to breathe fresh life into the house. Bruno remained by their side, almost as if guarding them, slowly returning to his joyful, energetic self. As they worked together on the house, Carl and Janice grew even closer. They spent hours talking, sharing their thoughts and feelings, and working side by side, not just to restore the house, but also to bring peace back into Carl's heart. Carl began to realize just how much he cherished Janice's presence in his life, how her smile could light up even the darkest moments. One evening, after a long day's work, they sat together on the renovated porch, watching the sunset and sipping lemonade. As the peaceful moment lingered, Carl took Janice's hand, and in that instant, he understood that his feelings for her had deepened into something more than friendship. With gratitude and tenderness, he gazed into Janice's eyes, and they both knew their lives were about to change while Bruno peacefully slept at their feet. What an incredible story! If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. See you in the next video.